My name is Matt Waring. I'm the editor at Arc Magazine, and this session has been organised by Nichia in association with ourselves at Arc TV. I was very happy to be invited to moderate today's webinar, and we'll have a Q&A later on in the session, but first we'll begin with a series of 3 short presentations from our esteemed panel of speakers. Up first, we have Dr. Enrique Strelow. Enrique is known in the scientific circles for his work in neuroscience, especially at the point of sale. He was the first person to use fMRI to predict sales at the actual point of sale, and in recent years has concentrated on the effect of various lighting conditions on shopper behaviour at the point of sale. He's currently conducting a series of scientific studies to investigate the effect on human-centred lighting on shopping behaviour. Up next, we'll have a brief presentation from Paul Nulty, who is the founder of award-winning lighting design consultancy Nulty. The studio regularly features within Arc Magazine and has offices around the world in London, Dubai, Beirut, Bangkok and Miami. And finally, rounding things off will be Dr. Ulf Meiners. Ulf is the managing director of Nichia in Europe, and he'll be joined by Giovanni Vecchio, who is the head of sales and marketing. Before we kick into the presentation, we do have one item of housekeeping. I'm sure many of you guys will have been on plenty of Zoom sessions over the past few weeks and months. As usual, please use the Q&A box to raise any questions that you will have, and then we'll try to address as many of these with our panel of speakers in the second half of the webinar. That's enough from me for now anyway, so without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Enrique for the first presentation.
Hi, good morning. I'm Enrique, and I'd like to entertain you with some insights from neuroscience. Let's begin with someone who had great insights into the human brain, even without modern technology. The famous writer Mark Twain. This picture here illustrates the story of Tom Sawyer, who is sentenced to paint this endlessly long fence, slate by slate. But then he got an idea. And an hour later, he sells the permission to paint one slate for the most valuable goods his friends do like to offer. So this story is about the power of perspective. And this is what good lighting does as well. It changes the perspective. How is visual input perceived by the brain? This model here is from Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. It explains the two systems in our brain, 1 and 2, which are both fed by the input of our senses. Most of the visual input is processed in system 1 without any consciousness. Very few stimuli arise to our consciousness and are processed in system 2. Why is this so? The functionality of our brain is 1 million years old. Deep down is our emotional network, and the processing of visual input takes place along a pathway through the whole brain. Our basic brain reacts to dangerous detections like saber-toothed tigers without any thinking. Thinking would take too much time and our species wouldn't exist anymore. Which is why our reaction to light is 1 million years old, regardless of what has happened yesterday or 1,000 years before. Visual input is processed in a very complicated algorithm. This is a model of the algorithm that processes visual input. It starts with very basic input like lines and stripes and is integrated on many layers to increasingly complex tasks like object recognition. Contrast, form and color are basic compared to complex patterns or words. Finally, our brain tries to make sense of the visual input. This famous example is again from Danny Kahneman. The fields A and B have the same brightness, but because our brain knows from history that this is a chess field pattern, it assigns different brightness values to the fields which are technically the same. lighting is always to be evaluated in the context of the situation and the goals which are to be achieved. A similar pattern happens here. Size is an impression relative to the surrounding, and the same dot is considered small or huge because of the situation it is in. Context is decisive for the identification of the character in the circle. It is either a B when read horizontally or 13 when read vertically. Context and situation are defined by light. Color is a perception by learned definition. The wavelengths do not construct categories of colors like we see them as green or yellow. This is a construction of our brain, which perceives a variety of wavelengths as part of the category yellow or green, and which were established by culture over the thousands of years. The blue light has an additional function which was discovered just 18 years ago, and this is like yesterday. This picture here is from the original paper, which described the discovery of special cells in the eye, which have no visual function, but a myopic sensitivity. The blue proportion of the morning light makes you awake and alert. The high blue midday keeps you going, and the decreasing proportion of blue in the afternoon and evening makes you tired. This extremely important function of daylight was detected just 18 years ago, and this knowledge for the most part is not yet used in retail lighting. Hollywood uses the most impressive contrast we know as humans, orange and blue, to a large extent in all their blockbusters. It is one of the secrets of success in modern filmmaking. Contrast and the warm hug of the evening sun is enabled either by the sun or by the OPTISOLATION 3000 from Nichia, which is as close to the sunlight as you can be. This OPTISOLATION 3000 creates the emotion of the evening sun and gives your fresh produce the best possible appearance. We tested this in an Edeka store in Wiesbaden, newly built 3 years ago, with a great success before the stores were overrun in the last month. The emotion provided by OPTISOLATION 3000 is unmatched in my experience. Here in my test store in Wiesbaden, in the category confectionery, we use tunable whites, firstly to increase visibility by increasing contrast between the goods and the aisles, and we adjust the color temperatures during the day to the changing daylights, which enables us to connect better to the shopper. Success in retail depends on a strong connection to the shopper, and the two-in-one creates the technology to do so. Especially also in dairy, the new OPTISOLATION 5000 COB offers a much better illumination and inspiration for the shopper, especially when you combine this with the whiter Solis for aisles in front of the self-service and service counters. Inspiration is essential for a better performance of the store. Thank you very much for your attention, and please join Paul now with his wonderful presentation. Thanks a lot.
So, yes, thank you for the introduction. I'm Paul Nulty. My lighting practice, Nulty, is based here in the UK, but we also have offices in Dubai, Beirut, Miami, and Bangkok. It's pretty much everywhere that I like to go on vacation. And this is a wonderful picture of my team that you should all be now seeing. We're not a boy band or a pop group, I promise. So what I wanted to do today was talk about sort of the art of retail lighting and retail lighting design, because it's important, and it's a different discipline from the production of good quality luminaires. So I always find that it's easiest to start by defining what architectural lighting is not. So what it is not about, in a retail context, is just product selection. It isn't just about choosing the right product. It isn't just about filling a space full of a quantity of light. It isn't just about achieving accreditation and legislation. And why is that? Well, because if that's all we're interested in, the quantity, box ticking to make sure we've achieved the right levels of light and choosing nice products out of a catalogue, then we end up with something like this, where we end up with a tide mark of light around the perimeter wall, a sea of downlights. We often refer to that as ceiling acne because it's a ceiling full of spots. And it's something pretty ugly, and thankfully they're not selling anything that's too expensive in this space. In reality, if it's planned properly and considered properly, then we end up with a really very well illuminated space that looks and feels designed. And again, it's very easy to get it wrong. Here in this supermarket, the lights are so bright that the eye is drawn upwards. And actually, it should be about putting the emphasis on the products, because ultimately that's what the supermarket is retailing. So here, this Spa supermarket by Lab 5 is brilliantly illuminated because it puts light exactly where it's required. It's the right light in the right place, in the right way, at the right time. So what is that essence that makes a piece of lighting design or a piece of lighting within a space good, ultimately? Well, I would always argue that it's this. No matter how amazing the technology, no matter how amazing the design of the space, we can use very simple lighting in simple ways and make it look and feel beautiful. And it is that's that je ne sais quoi, it's that essence, it's that emotional connection that we get with that space. Now, you might ask, well, what's that kind of emotional connection got to do with the price of fish and retail lighting? Well, think about John Lewis, a department store here in the UK. They are famous for their Christmas adverts. This is one from 2014 where a boy had a penguin as a best friend. Throughout that entire advert, not a single John Lewis product was mentioned. It was all about the subliminal brand messaging that John Lewis is an approachable, interesting, family-friendly retailer. Nothing to do with the pots and pans and the dishwashers and everything else that they sell. So it was all about emotionally connecting people with the brand and the brand identity. And it's something people like Coca-Cola do very well. We all know that red, but we also all know that holidays are coming jingle, which immediately says, oh, it's Christmas. It's an emotional connection that we have from a very young age with that particular brand. And if retailers can get that emotional connection, well, then, they've kind of half solved half of the problem. So there's a famous branding agency, Kilmer Marshall, that coined a phrase a few years back: a brand is worthless if it doesn't connect with the right audiences in a relevant way. And really, particularly in a post-COVID world where we've all suddenly got very used to shopping online, we've all got very used to Amazon turning up with a box for us, we've all got very used to that convenience that it offers. The retailers are now going to have to offer something completely different. They've got to compete with something we're now very comfortable with, and that is ultimately going to be about connecting their brand and their brand experience with people's expectations. Now, some people already do that very well. Think of Apple. Apple want to come across as being, relatively speaking, environmentally friendly. They want to come across as being the people's choice. Its graphical user interfaces are really easy to use. It's intuitive, and they want a store space to feel easy to navigate. They want it to feel natural. So what do? They fill it full of high energy, high energy consuming, back illuminated aerosol panels to make it feel like daylight, actually. So the space is designed to feel very intuitive and very natural and very easy to shop. It works really well. Think of Abercrombie and Fitch or Hollister. Their core demographic that they're interested in is late teenagers to early 20, affluent young people, all want to hang out in nightclubs, all want to look good, all want to hang out with good-looking people. They make that space as dark as possible so it feels like a nightclub. They pump up the music. They have sales staff that are kind of half-dressed. It's one of the only spaces you'll walk into where the emergency lighting is probably brighter than the actual lighting itself. And lo and behold, it's based upon Harvard University Library. So they've taken the university library and basically turned it into a retail space, entirely aimed at connecting their brand and their brand aspiration with their core demographic. And they know that market very, very well. So the challenge we have in this post-COVID world is going from bricks to clicks and back to bricks. You know, for the last sort of 10 years, the retail high street has been struggling. You know, we've seen several major retailers fall by the wayside over the last few years. It's only going to get worse. Here in the UK alone, there were tens of thousands of job losses yesterday announced from various retailers. So there are certain retailers like TM Lewin, which have already said they're now closing all stores and taking their entire trading online. So the challenge is going to be how we get people from bricks, you know, from the high street. They've moved over to clicks. How do we get them back to the high street? Well, brand experience is really what it's all about. Creating spaces that may not even be selling anything, but you go in there and you absorb yourself into the brand identity and you align yourself with the brand identity. Dyson do this incredibly well. You can walk into a Dyson store, you can try the vacuum cleaners, they have different carpets, they have different types of flooring that you can test, and they celebrate the engineering as though it is a museum. So it's a really interesting space to go in and shop as a customer, and it allows you to connect with the beauty and the engineering prowess of that particular brand. So as lighting designers, this means that there's a bit more pressure on us now, because it isn't just about choosing product and pointing it in the right direction. It's about really starting to understand surfaces and how lighting interacts with those surfaces. It's about understanding the way that we properly focus light rather than having all of this light hitting the floor like it is here in this department store. It's about ensuring that visual merchandising teams are properly trained so they're pointing lights in the right place. It's about enhancing finishes, working with LED manufacturers to produce the best quality product with the best color rendering that we possibly can to ensure that the product stands out and pops. It's particularly important in beauty retailing, where people like Estee Lauder have major problems with returns, because people go in, they choose an eye makeup, or they choose a foundation, and you go home and they find that people go home and find that it's not quite the color that they thought it was, and they take it back to store and they have to return it. So really choosing the best product and applying that. You know, if ever there was a time to not go cheap as far as lighting is concerned, now is it. Because if you get your lighting wrong right now, you're really only creating a problem for yourself in retailing. It is now about investing in the quality of light and the quality of the space. It is also about creating permeability within a space. You know, so many stores look closed when you're stood outside of them. And actually what's really key when we're lighting a space is to ensure that we create a foreground, a midground, and a background, because the eye is always drawn to the brightest point. So if you make the back of the space the brightest point, suddenly that store becomes permeable and visually interesting and feels welcoming. Contrast and drama, we need to start playing with those more. Typically speaking, the higher the contrast, the higher the quality product. Often this is to do with the way that things are re-merchandised and the speed at which they're re-merchandised. You tend to find people like Gucci and Louis Vuitton, the high-end brands, only re-merchandise for each season, whereas the lower-end brands often re-merchandise sort of fairly regularly. People like Primark and H&M, for example, are re-merchandising almost on a weekly basis. So there isn't time to refocus lights. They tend to go for relatively uniform spaces. But going for high contrast, does not necessarily mean it has to be dark. Abercrombie and Fitch has, a contrast ratio of around 15:1. We can still create 15:1 contrast ratios, but turn the lighting levels up on everything so that the likes of old people like me can still go and shop, and I don't have to take the item outside to see what it is I'm buying. And we need to focus more as a design community on vertical illumination, illuminating what is on sale rather than horizontal illumination, because not every retailer sells floors. And obviously integrating with the miniaturization of LED technology these days, we can better integrate than we ever have done before. And then we need to focus on layering light. It isn't just about putting spotlights into a space and walking away. We need to think more about the ambient levels of light, the accent levels of light, the feature lighting. We also now, in an increasingly digital world, also need to think about the contribution of light from digital media. If you have lots of media screens around a retail space, well, actually they start to cast a pretty nasty quality of light, a pretty nasty hue of light onto products. So we really need to think about the contribution of that, and also signage and wayfinding. And then really dynamic lighting. We're all for lighting controls, but use them in the right place at the right time. That might be in feature light fittings. It may well be in fitting rooms, where these days people want to see what they look like in front of a camera for selfies, but they also want to see what they look like at different times of the day. So we can dim the lights down so it looks like you're in a nightclub, or we can turn the lights up so it looks like you're on the beach, depending on what item of clothing you are trying on. So here's the thing, because this is a really important seminar. I think it's really important that we totally focus on the quality of light that these luminaires and light fittings and LEDs are producing, because they are, there are lots of variables that go into lighting design. As you saw at the very top of this presentation, if all you do is tick the boxes, then you end up with very soulless spaces. And where retailing is going now is about creating entertaining and exciting retail spaces. If all we do is rely on the technology, then we're in the wrong. There has to be a level of creativity that we bring to this, because that wonderful technology and product design, really they just facilitate those design. Supplier, manufacturer, lighting designer, architect, interior designer, sonic designer, aroma designer have all worked harmoniously to create sort of a visually arresting space that people want to return to. And if we're all in the world of selling retail lighting, then we need customers returning to the high street as quickly as possible in a post-COVID world. If you'd like to find out more, we have a wonderful blog on our website, www.nultylighting.co.uk, or we are available on all good social media on our hashtag @NultyLighting. With that in mind, I'll finish up.
So thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. My name is Ulf Meiners. I'm the managing director of Nichia, responsible for the DACH area here in Europe. Of course, we are not the ones to tell the wonderful stories we just have heard from Enrique and Paul. But of course, what we can do, we can help them to create those stories. And this is what Giovanni and myself will present to you in the next few minutes. Just a few words about Nichia. Nichia is a kind of hidden champion, and Nichia was founded already in 1956 as a chemical company producing, and this is somehow an internal joke, we are producing black and white powder. This still continues, but after a few years we have added semiconductor, phosphorus, and so on. And we have combined this to white LEDs, and just to let you know, Nichia is the inventor of the white LED. Nichia is still quite successful, even in the very difficult times, and fortunately we have not been affected by the corona pandemic. And we continue providing reliability, sustainability, and also innovation. And this is what I also, and Giovanni will talk about. We are known for premium quality, and we are still family owned, which somehow eases the business today. Some of our competitors, they are struggling. We are still there supporting innovation. Nichia has a quite broad spectrum of lighting solutions. Of course, and this is the subject of today, it's general lighting, but we are also providing products for automotive, laser diodes, UV displays, for backlighting, and also for specialty lighting. And this is what Giovanni is going to present to you. There's one advantage of Nichia. We do have an in-house capability to combine all the required features for an LED. It starts from machine engineering, then, as I already mentioned, the the mastering of the powders, so the chemical competence, but also the semiconductor, and then also the capacity or the capability for volume production. And just to have a reflection of what LED stands for. So LED has proven its advantage when comparing to incandescent, halogen, or fluorescent lighting. And up to now, there was a lot of focus on brightness. So we were talking about how to increase the lumen. There was a lot of discussion about efficacy, so the lumen per watt, the efficiency of a light source. And then, of course, and this is mainly driven by maintenance cost, there was a lot of focus on lifetime and reliability. But as Nichia, we are totally convinced, and we have seen very nice examples from Paul and Enrique, that there is more in lighting. So we have to look deeper into it. And it's not just brightness, efficacy, and lifetime. There is more in light. And we have combined this to a campaign, which Giovanni will comment on now.
Thank you, Ulf. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Giovanni Vecchio, and I'm the head of sales and marketing for Nichia LED, located in Germany. As we have heard already from the previous speakers, the retail area has specific requirements in terms of lighting, which are connection, emotion, and inspiration. Basically, these are all requirements that go beyond what previously stood for LED light. Here, we are mainly no longer talking about energy efficiency. Today, LEDs are already super efficient, offering more than 200 lumen per watt. Now, we are proud to be able to support these requirements with unique LEDs, such as the 2-in-1 tunable white, the full spectrum OPTISOLATION, and the for circadian rhythm optimized Solis LED. As these LEDs combine properties that go beyond the standard LEDs, it was time to create a specific motto for that. As you can see, light so good. This motto stands for LED properties such as innovative and smart, which make a significant contribution, positive contribution to modern lighting. And light so good is Nichia's commitment to human-centric lighting. Next, please. So, first member of the Light So Good motto is the 2-in-1 tunable white LED. On the right picture, we see how tunable white can accompany people through the day with the right color temperature and according to the body clock. Cool light and high intensity in the morning, neutral light and moderate intensity at noon, and warm light and low intensity in the evening. So this is the basic concept of tunable white, and as we know, it works. Because this is nothing different to what the nature offers us during the day outside. The 2-in-1 is the industry first tunable white LED in a mid-power 3030 package with a single light emitting surface. One cavity providing tunable white options at the full CCT range. However, in addition to the tunable white capability, the innovative 2-in-1 mid-power LED enables luminaire manufacturer to do even much more, like improve color tuning, improve or shrink optics, one LED instead of two, and improve fixture profiles while enabling new design options. As an example, reduced light guide thickness, reduced edge slit blindfold, and thinner luminaire sizes. Thank you. However, last is one huge benefit is that this technology also allows for higher color quality, depending on the CCT, up to a CRI of 90. So now, as next, we come to what two-in-one tunable white LED can, how this LED can contribute to the lighting requirements in retail. It is by facilitating connection. We see on the left side smooth and homogeneous color mixing. This is a beautiful light that invites to enter and stay in a shop. Then a color temperature adjustable from 2700 Kelvin to 6500 Kelvin to adapt to circadian rhythm and to get you in the right mood for shopping. Furthermore, improving work productivity by simulating color temperature to daylight, as an example on the right side. So, coming to the second member, which is the OPTISOLATION. OPTISOLATION is an LED that is developed around Nichia's blue chip and own phosphor technology. OPTISOLATION is the world's first series of LED and chip-on-board solution that mimic natural light without producing any harmful UV light. Here the CRI value of over 98 at full intensity and the R9 red content of over 94 are exceptional. Due to the absence of UV, this solution not only illuminates objects in a more vivid and impactful way, but it sustains them at their optimum, helping to avoid the deterioration of objects such as artworks, printing materials, or textiles. Finally, OPTISOLATION delivers a greater value in lumens per watt, resulting in significant energy savings. As a result, in retail, OPTISOLATION is perfect to present the products like in natural environment because of the high CRI and the full spectrum. One thing to add is that based on a study done by Fraunhofer, OPTISOLATION scored higher naturalness and higher ratings of compatibility compared to standard LEDs. So, what has OPTISOLATION to offer? What is the contribution in those three aspects that we saw? OPTISOLATION creates positive emotions. With OPTISOLATION, you see objects in a way that you are used to seeing in nature. Best color recognition at full sun spectrum. Furthermore, increased emotion through the vivid appearance and the high contrast of objects. And a comfortable illumination leads to an improved well-being and less stress in particular situations like pain, for example. At the end, who feels comfortable at spending money, right? So, coming to the next candidate is VitaSolis. So, generally, white LEDs consist of a blue light source with a layer of phosphor on top. And this combined to make white light. So far, so good. They do not usually provide a strong cyan component in their spectrum because this comes at a cost in terms of luminous efficacy. This means standard LEDs struggle to provide truly human-centric solutions that stimulate the human body. In that case, next member of the Light's a Good motto, VitaSolis, is different. It uses a unique combination of phosphors combined with a blue chip. Important here is the increased amount at around 490 nanometer. The higher amount of cyan still resulting in a natural white light, allowing VitaSolis to generate the optimum characteristics of light that our bodies use to regulate our body clock and help to improve motivation and productivity without losing efficacy. VitaSolis has basically almost the same efficiency as standard LEDs. Here we are talking about just minus 5% loss in efficacy. Yeah, Second, this solution also delivers a crisper white through less yellow in the spectrum. And third, a wider wavelength spectrum that brings a more comfortable illumination. As a conclusion, Solis technology enables users to benefit from the energy savings of an LED and the advantages of human-centric lighting. How does Solis support shopping behavior? Solis brings inspiration. Standard shopping light quickly makes you tired. I believe most of us can tell a story about that. Solis is in the non-visual aspect. You still have white light, but with the increased cyan combined with the wider spectrum leads to, for example, to reduced tiredness, providing improved shopping endurance and enjoyment. Due to less yellow in the spectrum, white appears more crisper and products looks more brilliant. The increased contrast and visibility makes people feel better. The higher cyan content in the wider spectrum leads to an increased vitality and higher concentration, valid for both store workers and shoppers. And in addition to all that great features, as the transmittance of the aging eye, human aging eye, is getting worse, an increased cyan portion between 450 nanometer and 500 nanometer brings advantages for better vision. Yeah, now I've come to the end of my presentation.
So now it's time to turn to your questions. We've got probably just over about 20 minutes to try and get stuck into these. And there's still time to ask your questions as well. So if you have any, please drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. The first question that we have is for Enrique, and it comes from Annie, who has asked, we all appreciate that lighting is an important factor that can impact on consumer behavior in shops, but why do you think retailers tend to ignore this fact?
Well, I can't talk about retail or food retail in Germany. And we used to see lighting in retail under the cost perspective. We optimized costs for 20 years, but we did not look on how does lighting affect sales. We started to do that maybe just a few years ago. And now we do see that those who have better lighting are performing better in the last months than those who have, let's say, regular lighting. Especially in these times, it is important to have an environment that entertains you, that fascinates you, and where you want to be. And that will make the difference in whether those in retail will stay in the business for the next years or will not. And I think lighting will make the difference.
Okay, excellent. We've had a question submitted from Vincent. Thank you for that, Vincent. And it's for Paul, saying that completely agrees that the lighting design process will have to embrace the brand of the retailer more than before. But how can the lighting manufacturer better support the lighting designers in this process?
Oh, that's a really good question. Lower the prices. No. Look, it's a symbiotic relationship. And I think often in the lighting world, there becomes a tension between manufacturer and some lighting designers, because some manufacturers offer lighting design service. And I think actually it's a symbiotic relationship that has to work, kind of hand in hand, because of supply chain, because of pricing, because of choosing the right quality product for the right job. So I think greater dialogue, actually, more events like this where we're sharing ideas, I think are particularly important. I would also venture that I think if ever there was a great time for the lighting as a service discussion, now in the retail world is maybe the right time, because I think a lot of retailers haven't got the money to spend on refurbishments because they've seen a sudden huge downturn in financial inputs coming from customers. but at the same time, in order to tempt customers back, they do need to offer something more. And instead of them going and buying cheap, kind of products, we want them to go and buy a good quality product because it will enhance the quality of their space. So I think there is a discussion to be had about how different lighting manufacturers can also bring lighting as a service to market, so that retailers are not having to have a huge capital outlay in one hit, and can maybe spread that cost over a 3 or 5 year period, because then it allows them to put a greater emphasis on the quality of light. And as Enrique said before and summed up very nicely, it was always about cost, which is why retailers didn't make it a priority. And I think they are now seeing that it has to be lighting, and actually sensory design has to be critical.
And we have another question come in from Francois as well, who has said that for many years retail lighting has been focused on Blackbody engineered spectra aimed at making the goods look more attractive. Is Nichia challenging this approach?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing for such innovative LEDs is really to make light that let shine products vivid, natural. So we want to have products set in place natural. Of course, it's a primary task of the luminaire maker, but yeah, our task is, of course, to provide the right tools. Yeah, the right tools to create the best fixtures possible.
Mm. Okay, excellent. And we've got a question here for Paul again. What issues do lighting designers find hard to solve within retail from a design or installation point of view?
Many issues. Yeah, I think I'm getting crikey, they were difficult questions. What issues? I mean, there are lots of issues. Supply chain. I have a project at the moment where somebody rang me up yesterday and said we're hoping to open in 4 weeks. So decisions get made very, very late in the day. Cost is a major problem at the moment because retailers just simply don't have money to invest, but they need to invest. So that's a real challenge for us as designers. For sure. I think there are a lot of unscrupulous manufacturers out there, of which Nichia are not one, I would add. But there are a lot of people out there that put a lot of misinformation into the marketplace, which muddies the water. And it doesn't help the likes of quality manufacturers and good designers either. I think being able to dig through that information and actually really understand what a product is doing and giving, and what a design is doing and providing to the space is also really important. So there are lots and lots of challenges. I give an extended version of that presentation, and normally I sum up by saying lighting design is easy. Anyone can do it. The art of lighting design, getting it right, is really difficult because there are so many variables, and that's the challenge.
Sure. We've had another question submitted from Himsini. I think this probably applies to all of you, really. I think it's talking about low contrast lighting. So can low contrast lighting be applied in any specific type of shop and also influence consumer or purchaser behavior positively? I don't know if anyone wants to dive in on that one.
I'll happily dive in if you're not bored of the sound of my voice. The short answer is yes, because again, the thing that's important to remember is we don't see light. We see the surface that light interacts with, right? So when we start to consider the surface finishes, then actually, yes. So you can have a very uniform scheme, but you can work with the interior designer or the architect to provide higher contrast finishes within that space. Ultimately, in retail, it is about laser focusing the consumer's eyes where you want them and controlling that. So it is about making sure that whatever you're selling pops, and it's as simple as that. And then if you have a very high turnover of product, if you were Lidl or Aldi in a food retailing environment, for example, where you're wheeling pallets of product onto the floor rather than having gondola displays, then often you want very high levels of uniformity. Whereas if you were a much higher end retailer, a Waitrose, for example, then you can often spotlight certain gondolas because they don't really move around and wine never moves and things. So it is really about understanding the brand messaging. It is about understanding finishes and the overall store design. But yes, you can use high contrast or low contrast in pretty much any environment.
Okay, excellent. We've got another question here, which I think is for Nichia. There's been a lot of talk recently about UVC lighting and how it can be used to disinfect products. So, yeah, can you explain UVC lighting application for surface or merchandise disinfection?
Yeah, so mainly for disinfection of not direct products, but let's say surfaces or shopping carts. Yes, we do see increased demand for that. I need to say that finally we see this demand because there are already good UVC LEDs out there with decent power and efficiency. As said, the demand is getting higher and higher, and the products are ready. It's basically a question of time because the product must be created with a certain safety. So there is a safety requirements for such products. But I think due to the specific time we are now facing with Corona, it is a hot topic, and and we of course support. We do have a 280 nanometer LED, which is suitable for such applications.
Just let me comment two more comments on that. We have some evidence because we have conducted a study for the efficiency of UVC, and it seems to be the only wavelength. So you have to go really low in UV to disinfect, as Giovanni said, surfaces like shopping carts or in public transport in a time that makes sense. So talking about seconds. So we have done this, and it's already an application. So in Netherlands there are installations where shopping carts are disinfected in real time. So therefore, yes, it works. And as Giovanni said, there is a strong demand at the moment, and we can help you with that.
Okay, cool. And we've got another question here, which is about TM30 color rendering and whether this will be more adapted within the retail world.
Can I speak about retail? So,
what is TM30?
Yeah, I don't know what is it, but I mean, this is of course our LED. So the Nichia LED fulfilled or has a very good TM30 results, but it depends on the light designer then at the end how much this will be implemented. So far, of course, there are other aspects as we presented, which should be considered for good lighting, especially for retail. TM30 could be one of them, but need to be further investigated. Yeah.
I think, can I just add to that? I mean, I think it's sort of incumbent upon the specification world, to be asking for that, because CRI is, it's kind of history. We need more of it, and again, but it's also a better way of justifying the better quality product as well. So, if you're asking a retailer to pay a premium, then you need to understand why, and TM30 certainly helps.
Okay, cool. And we've got a question here for Enrique as well, which is talking. I know in Paul's presentation he talked about the moving away from physical shops into the online world. So on a more general level, with so much online shopping facilities, what do you see as being the future of retail?
Well, very difficult to say. On food retail, we do have an increase of turnover by at least 20% in the last 4 months. So I do not see that the online share, which is something like 0.001%, it may increase or may not, I don't know. I do see the point that in non-food or in fashion, retail has really problems, and Amazon is making a huge profit and benefit of the situation. I do not see that for food retail. And I take the freedom to assume that it is partly because they haven't used Paul to do their retail lighting, but those places who did not improve their, let's say, entertainment and lighting in the last 10 or 15 years, they do have increasing problems with, let's say, sales. But those places who do invest in lighting are, at least from my perspective, doing better and not worse in the recent months.
I think it's really interesting when you look at retailers like Nike, Apple, Microsoft, Dyson. They don't care if you don't buy in store. You can go in store and it's all about experiencing, trying on a pair of trainers to play tennis with, trying on a vacuum cleaner, going in and seeing what your iPhone is like. And then you go home and you buy it online. It's all about actually just experiencing the brand and the products, and whether you buy it in store or whether you buy it online is almost irrelevant. And it's really interesting to see the retailers that are succeeding, because they are the ones that are adapting and revolutionizing their bricks sales model, as it were. They no longer talk about customers as customers; they're now guests. So it's moving towards that hospitality way. And you go look at Apple; it's all about the amphitheater and going in and learning how to use an Apple product, right? It's not about buying a Mac in store. So it is about that experience.
I do always wonder when I go into an Apple store how many people actually buy anything when they're in there. It seems like you just go in to play with stuff.
But there is an interesting fact, and that is in those cities where there are stores, they sell a lot more online compared to those cities where there are no stores. So even when the stores do not do a lot of turnover, they increase the turnover in the area they are in during online facilities. So regardless of where the people do the actual purchase, the store is a very important point for brands or retail communication.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've had another question come in from Santosh. Thank you for your question. It's all about the IoT. It's something that we've not come across just yet. So how do you see IoT adoption in retail lighting design?
Internet of Things, of course, is a very wide area. Nevertheless, I'm pretty convinced that the installation of light in any shop offers the possibility to connect to the light, to steer it, to control it. And on the other hand, also to use the position of the light to collect additional data, like how, for example, the people move or the carts are moved in the shops. So therefore, yes, I'm very convinced that this will happen, and I think it's already happening. Yeah.
I think it is happening, but I think again, it's up to us as a community to ensure that people are using it correctly. There's no point, selling, data gathering light fixtures with sensors if the retailer has no capacity to use that data.
Yeah.
Data is only useful if you can mine it properly. I mean, if anybody wants to go and start a new business today, I would say go and start a business in data gathering in retail, because there's a huge gap in the market for that. For sure, and that's the point. If you're a huge food retailer like a Sainsbury's or a Tesco's or a Spinneys, then perhaps you have the capacity to be able to gather and use that data. But if you're a relatively boutique fashion retailer, or you happen to be in a department store as a concession, then probably Internet of Things is almost irrelevant to you. And the other thing to bear in mind is most retailers are working on a 3 to 5 year repayment cycle. You know, their stores, they're only thinking 3 to 5 years ahead. So are they going to get a return on that investment in that relatively short space of time as well, is the other thing to take into account. There's a lot there.
Sure. And we've had another question come in. It's sort of following on from your ideas, Paul, about lighting within retail being more experiential. So do you think there will be a more theatrical, more dynamic and vivid lighting concepts in the future for retail stores? Yes,
but not necessarily coloured. Usually people are, when they ask that question, they're sort of thinking about coloured light. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that the big renaissance that we've got coming in the architectural lighting world is we're going to see more theatre and event style lighting coming in now. We're seeing that in the commercial world, the likes of Google and large kind of corporations creating much more events. I suspect in the post-COVID world, we're all going to be going into the office for events and meetings and probably actually doing the work from home. So I think all of our spaces are going to change. And I think we are, in the retail world, heading towards much more experiential design. So I think, I would be saying to anybody, expect to smell more, expect to hear more, expect to see more. Okay, great. So I'm just mindful of the time. We probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. So we've got one here, which I suppose would be relevant to Enrique and Paul, talking about how much of the focus or priority would you say is placed on performance and efficiency over the actual quality of light in a retail setting?
Well, in my experience, this is going to change. Let's say some competitors started to look on the effects of light, let's say something like 3 or 4 years ago. And now I think the whole retail is moving into the direction that costs are important, but the more important point is how does good lighting affect sales? And the experience we are doing here since a year is telling us that the effect is much more important than costs.
I second that. I often start by telling retailers, if you really want to save money and you really want to save energy, just turn the lights off. Just turn them off. Close the shop. It's fine. But of course, they're not going to do that because they need to sell. So now you want to sell product, do you? Okay, well then let's make sure that we maybe look at the balance between energy consumption and cost versus quality of light. Where I think we as an industry struggle is there are very few academic studies on the impact of sales or impact of lighting on sales and lighting alone, because often when a store is refurbished, it's lighting, it's signage, it's visual merchandise, everything gets refurbished. It would be a brave retailer that said, I'm only going to change the lighting, and then we're going to see, we in 10 years of operating my business, we have 3 projects where we have genuine statistics on the impact of lighting on sales, which is very few. So there are very few academic studies, and I think if there were more and we could quantify more in terms of sales percentage increase, then I think that would do us a lot of favors, because then we can start to compare the cost versus quality argument and quantify that, and that's really where we need to get to.
I suppose that kind of ties into the work that Enrique is doing at the moment as well.
Yeah.
Well, so just some results in the next webinar.
Excellent. Well, yeah, just looking at the time, it would appear that is all that we've actually got time for. It's a shame because this is such a fascinating topic, especially with everything going on in the world at the moment. It's something that we could have talked about for much longer, but unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. So I just wanted to say thank you very much first to Nichia for organising this webinar, and also to Paul and Enrique for taking part as well, and to everyone that's tuned in and sent in their questions. I hope you've all found it as interesting as I have.